Kaywood, and I'm the Solution Architect here at Fujifilm Microchannel for SAP Business One. So today we're just going to have a deep dive into the inventory module within SAP Business One. And what we'll be covering today is initially the item master data and going through all the different settings on your item master data. Then we'll have a look at bin location management. So for those of you who have warehouses with multiple bin locations and looking to set that up. And then we'll have a look at serial and batch tracking within SAP, as well as stock takes and cycle counts. And then we'll sort of get into pick and pack manager for dispatching of goods. And then just a couple of overviews at the end, which will overview how the pricing structure works in SAP. Have a look at some of the inventory reporting that's been introduced in the newer versions, and then look at an overview of what is available within the web client from an inventory perspective. So with that, let's get started. So the first thing I wanted to take you through was just a couple of settings when it comes to our inventory and item master data. So under administration, system initialization, general settings, if we look at the inventory tab, we've got a couple of options here. So the first one being serial and batch numbers. So if you're managing serial and batch numbers within SAP, how do you want to manage it? Is it on every transaction or on release only? And the difference between those two is that every transaction means when you receipt a good that's serial and batch managed, you would have to apply a serial or batch number at that particular time. If it was on release only, you only need to do it whenever the particular item is leaving SAP or going out of stock, so either a goods issue or a delivery within SAP. Okay. Then we have issues. How do we issue our serial and batch numbers? So do we do it by a serial and batch number, or do we want the system to do it by bin locations? And we'll get into that more in the pick and pack manager. And then how do we store our unique serial numbers? Is it by manufacturer's serial number? Is it our own internal serial number? Or is it a lot number? Okay. And just one or two more settings on serial numbers. Do we want to automatically create an equipment card? So that means when we sell a serial number, it automatically creates the equipment card that we can then use later in our service processes. Okay, and then we've got basic settings for batch status. So how do we want our batches? What is the default status for our batches? So we can lock a batch, or we can just say it's not accessible as well. Okay, and then we can block receipts for the same batch as well, so that you can't receive the same batch number again. Okay. And then we just have default warehouses, so you can set a default warehouse. This can obviously be changed per product as well, or in any document. And then we've got how do we post to the general ledger? Is it by warehouse? Is it by item group? Or do we want to specify that on an item by item basis? Okay. And then just on the top right, we've also got options to display inactive items. So do we want to see inactive items in reports and marketing documents? If we turn this off, it just means that when we open up a sales order, for example, and we're searching for items, our inactive items will not show. So that's just preference from business to business. Okay. So with that, let's have a look at the inventory master data first. So I'm just going to open up an item master data. I'm going to search for a particular item here. And what we're going to do now is just go through each of the tabs, go into some things in a little bit more detail. So we've got our general item code, which can't be changed after you've transacted with the product. And then we've got descriptions, and we can use foreign name either for an additional description or if you wanted a translated description in another language. Then we've got item types. So just under this, we've got item or labor. And then we've got item groups, which can be used for reporting. As we mentioned earlier, can be used for how we post to the GL, as well as for pricing. So we can set up different discount groups, etc., per item group. Okay. Then we got units of measure. I'm going to cover units of measure on a separate item at the end of the item master topic, so we'll get to that. And then we've got this different price lists. So this is just a view. So you can have all your different price lists here and actually view the different price. So if you look at that field, as soon as I change the price list, we can see the price changing here. I can also update the price directly from here. So if I wanted to change this particular price list, I could simply update it in this field. Okay. And then we have barcodes. So we can store multiple different barcodes against a particular product. And with the unit of measure management as well, we can store barcodes for each different unit of measure. Okay. And just a couple of settings on the general tab, so we can either apply or not apply discount groups or not apply discount as a whole. Then we've got manufacturers, so again, just for reporting and discount purposes, we can report on manufacturers and we can set up discounts for certain manufacturers. Additional identifiers, so anything that you need to ID a product additionally. And then we can set up default shipping types, which just default in the sales order documents on the logistics tab. And then we've got manage items by serial or batch. So here we would just select none, or if we want to manage it by serial number, we'd select serial number or batch as well. So we'll get into that in a little bit more detail as well a little bit later on. Okay. What we can also do is make our item active or inactive for a certain period of time. And then on the top right, we can, when we're creating an item, we can say whether it's an inventory item, so we do want to track stock of this particular item, or whether it's only a sales item, so that meaning we do not actually purchase that item. So an example of that could be it's a finished product, it's an inventory item and a sales item. So we do not purchase it, we make it ourselves, we purchase the raw materials. And then on the opposite side, we could have an inventory item that's a purchase item, but not a sales item, and that just means we can't sell that particular product. Okay. Now looking at the purchasing tab, the most common thing is our preferred vendors. So in this field, we can either set up a single preferred vendor, or we can set up multiple different preferred vendors. So if you can source things from multiple different places, you can have a list here, and you can set one as a default in particular. And this will then pull through within your MRP or any purchasing wizards that you run within the system. Then we have our manufacturer's catalog number. So if you want to store that data here, we can store that in here. And then we just have different purchasing units of measure. So I say I purchase this in eaches, and then my packaging UOM is a pallet, and there's 10 eaches per pallet. When we're not using units of measure, this is all free form. However, when we are actually using the units of measure, so these units of measure groups, this is not free form. You would have to select from a particular unit of measure, and I'll explain that when we go through a particular item. We've also got on the right-hand side, so we can store different weights and dimensions. So if you need to work out any of that when you're purchasing, as well as on the sales side, we've got pretty much the same stuff. So we've also got unit of measure name, as well as our packaging unit of measure. And then we've also got weights and dimensions here. Okay. Now getting into the inventory tab, this is where we can set how a particular item hits the GL. So you might have set a default on your general settings, but here you can actually change it for a particular item. So if you want certain items to use the item group, or if you even wanted to specify it at an item level for a particular item, you could do that too. Okay. And then on the inventory tab, we have a list or a view of all our warehouses. We can see what's in stock. If you've got bin locations assigned, you'll be able to see some bin location information, such as the first bin location this item was receipted into. Then we've got committed. So committed is anything that is in a sales order or production order. And then just going to go to ordered quickly. So ordered is anything, again, that's on a production order or on a purchase order that's still open. And then our available is the in stock minus the committed plus the ordered. Then we've also got item costs. So in my case, I have item costs set up per warehouse. So this is also a setting. It's an irreversible setting. So you can either have item cost at a global level, and then you would see that field under the valuation method, or you can have it at a warehouse level, and then you would see it by warehouse. Okay. And then if you had bin location turned on, you could also set default bin locations for particular items, as well as enforce the default bin location. Okay. Now, just on the valuation method, I'm just going to go into a new item quickly, just so I can go through some of the options. If I just go there. So we've got 4 different valuation methods now, and I'll show you what I mean by 4. So we've got moving average, which is an average cost across the items, or we have standard, where you can stipulate the standard cost, or we've got first in, first out. And then the 4th one that I was talking about is if we have a serial or batch managed item, we can now in version 10 apply serial and batch costing. So that means each serial, each batch is costed on its own, and that's what will hit your cost of goods sold when you sell that particular product. Just one thing to note is if you do have batch managed items and you do have the item cost at a warehouse level, if you have the same batch in multiple warehouses, it will not split the cost across those warehouses. So that same batch will have the same cost in your different warehouses, and that's why you can sometimes see a difference in your inventory audit report. Okay. Now, let's just quickly go back to the item that we were looking at. And we're just going to quickly look at the planning tab, which is all related to how we purchase the particular item or how we make the particular item. So here we can either say we want to include this for our MRP runs or we don't. Then we've got procurement methods, so that's whether we buy it or make it. And what this allows us, or allows the system to do, is recommend whether it needs to create a purchase order or a production order. And then we just have a few different categories for the MRP as well, which is order multiples. So we always have to order in multiples of 10, and we have to order a minimum quantity of 50 for this item. And then we've just got lead time and tolerance days, which allows, again, our MRP to make sure that we're ordering the stock in time to meet our fulfillment. Okay. In production, we're not going to go through this tab today. We've got a whole separate webinar on production. So the next tab is properties. So we can use properties just to classify different items for further reporting, further than our item groups. So you can create these properties yourself, and then you can mark items relevant to multiple different properties. You can also add remarks and images to a particular product, or you could even add attachments, and you can add as many different attachments as you want. So whether it's an item specification sheet or anything like that, you could add it in to the attachments. Okay. So just before we move on from item master data, I just wanted to show you an example of an item that is has units of measure assigned. So I'm just going to click into this particular unit of measure group. And what we will see here is the different definitions. So this unit of measure group is called paper. So what we do in our unit of measure definition is always start from the lowest level. So here we've got a base quantity of 1 equals 1 pack. Then we've got a small pack, which is 2. And then we've got 1 6-pack, which equals 6 of the base quantity. And then we've got 1 carton that equals 24, and 1 pallet equals 48, and so forth. Now, additional things that we can see here is on the barcodes, we can actually assign different barcodes to our different units of measure, as well as pricing. How do we want to price our units? We can actually price our different units of measure as well. So we can say, I want to do a price for a pallet, for example, and I want to actually price this at 250. Sorry, that's a percentage field, don't want to reduce that, I can go in here. Okay. Right, and then here we can actually view our different pricing in the different units of measure. Okay. And then, as I mentioned earlier, under the purchasing and sales tabs, your different units of measure for purchasing and sales respectively are not free form anymore. You can actually choose now from your particular unit of measure definition how you purchase and sell those particular products. Okay. And then just on the inventory tab, what we can see here now as well is our UOM code on how we look at the data and how we track what's in stock is by pack, so our lowest level, so individual level. But when we do inventory counting, how do we want to count this particular product? And I've said when I do inventory counting, I want to count this in 6 packs. So those are the main differences when your item is unit of measure managed as opposed to just set to manual. Okay. Now let's just go back to the previous item. So just some functions that I'm going to show here are direct functions from the item master, so things we can do directly from the item master. So if you right click, things that we can do is we can actually create business partner catalog numbers. So for example, your vendors or customers use different item codes. You can store that information here, and what your users can do is instead of entering your item code in a purchase order or sales order, they can simply enter this into the BP catalog number field, and it will relate and bring through your item code. Okay. Some other things we can do is we can navigate directly to a bill of material. So if this product had a bill of material, we can open the bill of material directly from here, or we can define alternative items. So for example, this item, I have an alternative item here with a match factor of 20%. So this just could be an upsell or cross-sell opportunity or a replacement part for this particular product. And then I have an item that is 100% match factor, and that is an actual replacement for this item. And this is used when entering sales orders. When we're doing a stock availability check, we can see we don't have this particular product in stock, but here is an alternative. Okay. And then we can just run a couple of reports directly relating to this item. So we can run our inventory posting report, our audit reports. If you've got bin locations again, bin location content, and a couple of other reports, as well as create transactions directly from the screen. So I can create a purchase quotation, I can do some comparisons, and look at an available to promise report. The other thing we have is a relationship map. This is more relating to when you've got a bill of material. So I can see my bill of material here, I can see all my components, and I can see the relationship between this item and the bill of material. And I can also have a look at my alternative items in a visual format. So this is my current item, and these are my different alternative items with the match factors. Okay, so that's an overview on the item master. The next thing we're going to get into is bin location management. So there's a couple of setup tasks that we need to do when we enable bin locations. So under administration, setup, and inventory, under bin locations, we'll see a few options here. So the first thing would be to activate our different bin location levels. So these could be, in my example, I've got an aisle, a shelf, and a level. You can go up to 4 different levels. And the way the bin location code would be structured is the warehouse code, then the aisle code, the shelf code, and the level code. Okay. Then we have our different warehouse sub-levels. So here you can create your different aisles, you can create your different shelves, you can also create your different levels. If you wanted to do this manually, you could do it here, or alternatively, you could come to your warehouse sub-level code management, and you could generate, delete, or update different warehouse sub-levels. In this example, I'm just going to create additional levels. So I've got an L as a prefix in my levels, and I will then go from level 6 to level 10. And if I say OK, it'll give me a preview, and I can simply say generate. And if I go back to my warehouse sublevels and go back to level, we can see the system has now generated those particular levels for us. Okay. So let's just jump back to bin location management under our inventory menu option. So under inventory, we've got bin locations, and here again, we've got a couple of different options. So bin location management, this is where we can generate locations. So we've just generated a couple new levels, and let's say we wanted to generate the actual bin locations for those new levels in the system. So what I'll do is I'll select my warehouse. I'll say I want to create it for all aisles and all shelves, and it's going to go and create those particular levels for us just from the new ones. And I can either set some defaults here, which we'll go through in a second, but basically I can say OK, and it's going to go and create all these new bin locations for me, so I don't have to go and create them manually. Okay. Let's go into the bin location master data, and let's just have a look at a particular bin location. Now, before we get into these different fields, let's have a look at a warehouse level, what we need to do to enable the bin locations for a particular warehouse. So now that we have all our bin locations set up, we can come and enable bin locations for a particular warehouse, and then you'll see the bin locations tab appears. And here we can define different separators on how we want to view our bin locations, how many bin locations this particular warehouse has, what the default bin location is for this warehouse. Now just remember, this can be changed on an item by item basis as well as enforce the default bin location. So what this means is, again, it's a default, so you can change it by item, but if you have this ticked, when you receive items, it's going to force you to receive it into a default bin location. Then automatic allocation on issue and receipts. So how do we automatically assign our bin locations when we're creating pick lists or doing deliveries? So we've got a number of different options. Now the first one, single choice, it doesn't really work in real life. And basically what this means is allocating items from bin locations when there's only one way of doing it. So either a bin location has the total number of quantities that you require for an order, or multiple bin locations equal the total number. If those aren't met, it won't actually allocate. So just keep that in mind. And then we've got bin location orders, alternative sort codes, descending quantities, ascending quantities, and then first in, first out, or last in, first out. Okay, and then similarly on the receipt, so automatic allocation on the receipting side, do we want it to go into the default bin location, or where it was last received, or where the item currently sits? Okay. Okay, so that's just on the warehouse side. And then if we look at our actual bin location master data, now we have a lot of different options over here. So if you want to make a bin location inactive, you need to clear the stock out of that bin location first. Whether it's a receiving bin location, so if this is not ticked, you cannot receive products in via good receipt. And also whether you want to exclude this particular bin location on automatic allocation from issues. So if you want to choose the bin location manually, you can simply select this option. Okay. Then we've got some fields that are automatically calculated by the system. So the item weight, so if you have items with weight set up, it'll tell you the total weight that's in the bin location, the number of items, as well as the item quantity, and the number of different serial and batches if you had that as well. Then we can assign alternative sort codes. So you would have seen on the automatic allocation for issue, you can use these alternative sort codes when you are creating pick lists. And then we've got different things like maximum and minimum quantities and maximum weights. So you can restrict receipting into a bin location via your maximum quantities as well as maximum weights. And then furthermore, we can actually have different restrictions on bin locations. We can restrict it to a specific item. We can restrict it to different item groups so that you're only allowed to have that particular product in that location. And then also if you had different units of measure, for example, if you had a bulk bin, you could restrict it to only having, pallets in that bulk bin, and then your pick face only having individual units. Okay. We can also restrict to different transactions. So whether it's restricted to inbound transactions or outbound transactions, or everything except inventory transfers and counting transactions. Okay, so that covers the bin location management side of things within the system. Next, we're just going to have a look at serial and batch. So I'm just going to open up a serialized item that I have. So just again, this is a serialized item. So I can see here, manage item by serial numbers. And here I have the management method. So again, every transaction or release only, as well as how do I issue this particular product. And this is when you're creating pick lists again, how do you automatically issue this product? Do you do it by serial number or do you do it by your bin locations? Okay. Just a couple of other things that we can do with serial numbers. We can actually run a serial number transaction report directly from the particular product. And what this will do on the top table, it gives us a list of all our different serial numbers. And on the bottom table, it gives us all the different transactions that have happened against a particular serial number, as well as a direction. So we can see this particular, this was a goods receipt, so the direction was in, and this was a delivery, so the serial number's gone out. The same is available for batch managed items, so it just gives you full traceability on the particular serial or batch number. And then on the top, we've also got a status, which shows us whether it's available or unavailable. So I'm going to go to an available serial number, and I can actually drill into this particular serial number, and I can update certain things and view some details about that particular serial number. Okay. We can also get to serial and batch management under inventory and item management. And here we've got item serial numbers, for example. So serial number management, I can do bulk operations here as well. I can update existing fields on serial numbers, or I can complete certain serial numbers, or create serial numbers that I've already receipted goods for if they were set to release only. Okay. And then batch management as well, same thing. We can do bulk updates against batches. And we can also look at particular batch details. So I just want to show you quickly here. I want to search for a particular batch, particular item. And let me go to here. What I can see here that's addition to the serial numbers is a quantities button. And this will show me my existing quantity, how many have been allocated. So if you've already allocated a certain batch to a pick list or sales order, that will show here, as well as your available quantity here. Also, if you wanted to come and lock a batch or change it to non-accessible, this is where you would do that. So in your batch details. Now, I'm just going to quickly run you through a process of receipting and delivering serial and batch items, just so you can see what that looks like. So let me just create a goods receipt in the system. And let me create it for a batch product, as well as my serial number product. I'm going to do 10 of that and 10 of that. And once I click add, the document won't just add, it'll tell me it needs a batch number for this particular item. and I can either enter a batch number over here, so I can say batch 1, 2, 3, 4, and if I had multiple different batches, I could say that batch is only, or it's only for a quantity of 5, and I can update that, and I can enter another batch here. Okay. Now, once I click add again, now for the serial number item, the exact same thing, but what I wanted to showcase here was that you can either import them from Excel, or you can also do automatic creation, and this is the same on the batch side. Okay. So if I wanted to go automatic creation, let's see here, if we needed a string, so I can say, for example, laser printer, and then I wanted a numeric field, and I can say, let's go 001, and just increase that particular number. And this is only if we're managing it by an internal serial number. So what I'll do is create, and we'll see that's gone and created all the serial numbers for me in this particular transaction. I can simply add that. And now if I do on the same on the sales side, so let's do a delivery quickly. Let's choose any customer, and let's go the same items. Let's go 2 and 5 and add in view. What you'll now see again is instead of bringing the serial number batch numbers in, we need to now select them. So we can either select particular items here. So I want to allocate one from that batch, or I could simply just say auto select. I think I only had one quantity. Okay, let's do that again. Okay, so now I can just say auto select with the serial numbers, and it's automatically allocated those serial numbers to this particular delivery. And I can simply add that, and that will then record the serial number transaction in the system. Okay, so that takes us through serial and batch tracking. The next thing we need to cover is stock takes and cycle counts. So there's a few settings that some of you might not be aware of. So under administration, system initialization, we've got document settings, and we've got the per document tab. So here I've selected inventory counting, and you'll see how these settings apply when we actually go into the counting sheets. So here we can have different variances highlighted to us. So what will happen is any variances over 5%, the line will go red in SAP. And you can have the same thing for multiple counters. And then we can also choose what do we want to do when we're copying an inventory counting to a posting with counted rows. Do we want to just close that count sheet, or do we want user confirmation as well? And then we've got calculate the in-warehouse quantity on count date based on creation dates or posting dates. So what this is if you're creating a count sheet with a posting day of tomorrow, for example, so you're pre-creating the count sheets, when you open up the count sheet tomorrow, it'll take everything up until tomorrow's posting date. But if you had transaction by creation date set, it will actually take any transactions that have been created today or use the creation date and adjust the quantities accordingly. Okay. Just the next thing that we need to have a look at is cycle counts. So anyone who's wanting to use cycle counts and set up those sort of automated processes, under setup and inventory, we've got two different settings here. So we've got inventory cycles. So here you can set up multiple different cycles. So whether you want to have a weekly cycle, a monthly cycle, a daily cycle, you can set up the particular cycle, and I'm just going to move that to the right-hand side. And then we've got cycle count determination. Yeah. So it's done by item group in SAP, but for each warehouse, what you can do is double-click to drill down, and for each item group, you can assign a different cycle code. So if you had certain item groups you wanted to count weekly and others that you wanted to count monthly, you could assign the different cycle codes to those particular groups. And you can also select whether you want to receive alerts and to which users those alerts should go to. And they would simply just get a pop-up on the day to say these items are due to be counted. Sorry, wrong button. Additionally, how users can get the cycle count recommendations is by running a report. So under inventory, we've got inventory reports, inventory transactions, and here we have cycle count recommendations. So you can choose which warehouse, you can choose which cycle codes as well, particular items, and you can filter by different bin locations. And once I run my cycle count recommendations, you can select what you want to count, or you can simply select all and create the inventory counting sheet. Okay. I'm just going to go into a normal inventory counting sheet quickly and just show you the different ways, again, how we can create them if we're not using cycle count recommendations. So what we can do here is we can set a count date. We can also use single or multiple counters. So if you had multiple people counting the same inventory sheet, you could set that too. And then we can add our items. So you can either add them manually or you can simply select items. So for example, you wanted to select items from a particular vendor for a particular warehouse. I could simply say, okay, and that would bring in those particular items for me. The other way we can do it is we can import from Excel. Okay, so I'm just going to bring up an Excel that I've got open. And what we can see here in the Excel is item code, warehouse, and bin location. So this Excel has multiple or the same items, but from different warehouses and different bin locations. And I can simply just choose that Excel document and say import. And what that'll do is bring those items into the count sheet for me. And then I can simply just go and add that count sheet into the system. Now, we have the option to freeze stock. So that just means no transactions can happen while we're doing an inventory count. So that's just an option to your business if it suits. And then what we can do is print out this count sheet, give it to our counters to go and count. And once we get that information back, we can simply come and enter the counted quantities. So for example, here I can say I counted 30. Here I actually counted, I'm just going to say 0 for that particular line. And here I'm going to say I counted 30 as well. And because we've got a variance of over 5%, we can see that line is now highlighted in a different color. Okay. Once you update that and you're ready to do the postings, so if you don't have to do a recount, you can simply copy to an inventory posting, and this will then either reduce or increase the stock based on the counted quantity. Okay. So I'm just going to add that into the system now and go back to my stock count, and what we can see here is those two items are now set to closed, and my users or my warehouse staff can continue to go and count the rest of the items. Okay. Last thing on stock counts is just the reporting. So under your inventory reports, we do have an inventory counting transactions report, and this can serve as a report for a lot of different things. So you can either look for specific counts between certain dates, specific users, specific counters, or you could also say display only items not counted since. So what this will do is give you a list of all the items you haven't counted since a certain date, for example. I'm just going to run this report like this for now. And what this gives you an overview by product, by warehouse, for each count that's taken place within your parameters and what the variances have been. So for example, I've got this particular count where we counted 50, we had a variance of 40, and the variance was actually 400%. So we can use this report just to view all the results of particular counts. That wraps up the counting, and I'm just keeping track on time. We don't have a lot of time left, so the next topic I wanted to cover was just the pick and pack manager. So under inventory, we've got the pick and pack option and the pick and pack manager. So what this allows us to do is group different documents together and have them all in one screen and see what orders we need to fulfill, or what production orders we need to pick stock for, or any inventory transfers that we need to pick stock for. You can save your selection criteria, and what I mean by that is you can choose all your options here. So you can either say what status of documents you're looking for. You can group certain things, so you can group by document, or you can have none. If you've got none, it'll show you each item just on its own line. And then you can have different things, like you only want to search sales orders with a required date of, let's say, I want to go 5 days back until today. You can do it for certain customers. You can also do it by fulfillment. So if you only wanted to see sales orders that you can fulfill 100%, you could change these parameters like this. Okay. And then you can also select which warehouses you wanted to run this for. And once we run this, it'll bring us a list of all the different documents that we have, the different items, what is open, what we have to, or what we need to release, as well as what is available to release. Okay. Then the next step here would be to release these particular orders and create those pick lists. And I'm just going to show you different examples, from a non-bin managed warehouse, and then I'll show you another example from a bin managed warehouse, just so you can see the difference. So for example, I'm going to choose this particular order, and I want to release that to a pick list. Once I click next, I can now choose how I want to split the pick list. So if we had multiple different orders for multiple different customers and items, we could split the pick list into different pick lists, either by customer, by item, by warehouse, or we could just create one big pick list for everything. And if I do that, I'll say generate. And what we'll see, that order is now moved from the open screen, and we'll see that in the released screen. And here we can simply open up the pick list, where we can come and enter the pick quantity. And once we have done that, we can go to the picked screen, and we would see the particular document here. And directly from the screen, we could actually click the order, and we could either create a delivery or an invoice, or if we were picking for transfers, we could create an inventory transfer. Okay. Now, just coming back to the pick and pack production manager screen, I just wanted to show you an example from a bin location managed warehouse. So if I had to release this particular line that is part of my bin location warehouse, what we'll see now, this is a serial number one. Let me not choose that. Okay. Let's go with the serial number one. So what we'll see here is, because I've got issue by serial number ticked on this particular product and not by bin location, I actually have to choose a serial number before I can go ahead with this. Okay. And what I mean by that is, if I just open up the product, what we've got here is issue primarily by serial and batch numbers. If I had bin locations set up, then we would see a different screen, and I'll show you that when we click this particular item. What we can see here is also now how do we want to generate the pick list, and this is when it's enabled by when bin location management is enabled. We can actually split the pick list between different shelves or aisles or levels if you wanted different pickers to do different areas within the warehouse. Okay, and then furthermore, we can split between our item groups and business partners, etc. again. Once I generate that, again, the same process continues. Okay. All right, so that just wraps up the pick and pack. Next couple of things we wanted to do was just an overview on pricing. So what I wanted to achieve here is just sort of outlay the pricing structure in SAP. So within SAP Business One, we have our price lists. So this is where we can enter all our items prices and assign a particular price list to a customer or supplier. Then we have period and volume discounts. So this is where we can enter particular period and volume discounts. So if we're running a special for a particular month, we can do that. So for example, I've got this particular item. I can double click, I can choose a valid range. And what I can do further is drill down into that, and I can add price breaks. So I can say for 5 quantity, we get 2% discount. For a 10 quantity, we get 5% discount. And once I update, that'll automatically be applied to the sales orders. Period and volume discounts then override whatever we had in the price list. And then we get to discount groups, where we can either specify different discounts by item groups, we can specify by item properties, manufacturers, or individual items. Okay. And that then overrides our period and volume discounts. And then we've got special prices for business partners, where we can actually assign particular items to particular customers, which then overrides discount groups, period and volume discounts, as well as the price list. Okay. Within special prices for discount for customers, you can also do periods. So you can specify that it's only for a particular period, or as well as price breaks as well, okay, which are only relevant to that particular customer. And then on top of all of this, if you had blanket agreements set up in SAP, this would override all of these different pricing structures if you selected the setting. Just lastly, well, not lastly, just in terms of reporting, we just wanted to do a quick overview on reporting. So I'm just going to go to some of the newer reports. So we've got now in version 10, we've got the inventory aging report. It was available in some localizations in late 9.3 versions, but since version 10, it's available in all localizations. So what this allows us to do is just have a look at the aging of our inventory. So you can choose a specific report date, only run it for certain item codes or certain warehouses, and the issue strategy. Do you want to age it, or do you want to see it by last in, first out, or first in, first out? Okay. And you can define your different intervals or brackets, aging brackets here. And once you run this report, it might take a couple of seconds to run. Hopefully not too long. Perfect. Let's just view fit column width so we can see what's going on. And basically what this gives us is a breakdown by product, a total value, as well as the value sitting in each of our different aging brackets. All right. So that's just probably the main new report that's been added to the system. And then obviously the most important report is our inventory audit report, which displays the total inventory value for all our items according to the selection criteria that we choose. And depending on whether you choose summarized by items or accounts, the output would be different. Okay. If I just run this, and let's just run this for a particular item group. What we can see here is all our items, and if we expand this, we'll see items and all our transactions, and then our warehouses, and we can see our cumulative quantity, cumulative value. So you can use this report to go and investigate any transactions or anything that's happened with a particular item. Okay. The last thing I'm going to show you is the web client. So the web client is relatively new in SAP Business One. It's probably about 60% of the way there, and we're hoping it'll be 100% of the way this time next year. So what we just wanted to showcase was the different inventory functionality that is currently available in the web client. And it's just basically the web client is a different way to access the system. So you can access it via a browser, whether you want to use a computer or an iPad. So it just allows a little bit more mobility. So from a web client perspective, there is quite a lot that we can do. So we can create items, we can create alternative items, as well as view and manage business partner catalog numbers. And then from a transaction perspective, we can view goods issues, create goods issues. We can do goods receipts. We can even do inventory counting. We can create inventory transfers and inventory transfer requests. Okay, so majority of the functionality is available. And what we'll quickly have a look at is how we create something in the web client, and you can see the difference between the web client and the traditional SAP Business One client. Okay, so what we can see here is just a browser-based screen. It does look a lot more modern than our traditional client, but essentially the process is still the same. And we can simply choose an item to create a goods receipt. And I can simply just add that. Okay. Probably one of the biggest benefits of the web client is how we can actually view the data. So for example, I want to have a look at all my different inventory transfer requests. What we can do is have this data and we can view it in a visual format. So if I had a little bit more data here, it would make more sense. But what we could say here is I want to see things by item code. Well, let's just look at quantity in warehouse and info price, for example. So not a very good example, but I suppose it just shows how you can analyze the data in a different way, where we're used to just having lists of data in the traditional client.